My topic is Muslim women contribution to mathematics. My presentation will be divided in 5 parts. Part 1, I'm going to tell you the background. Part 2, need for study. Part 3, I'll tell you the purpose. Part 4, the methodology. And finally, I'll tell you the procedure. Now let's start with part 1. It all started a few months ago in the spring semester when I was taking a math course with Professor Flint. One of the big assignment in that course was to make a presentation on a women mathematician, and I decided to make my presentation on a Muslim women mathematician. So I chose Mariam Mirzakhani, obvious choice of course, now only to find out that one of my other classmates, Minay, chose that topic. But I said to myself, no worries, there are many more Muslim women mathematicians, so I can definitely choose someone else. So I started doing some research, going back to from 20th century to 19 to 18 to 17 to 16, all Ottoman Empire, but really it was frustrating. I did not find any noted women mathematician. So I thought I should take more time, but meanwhile I received an email from professor and she reminded me that the semester was almost end. I had to submit my assignment. So I was kind of forced to do it on Shakuntala Devi, an Indian mathematician. But that frustration remained in my mind and heart. I initially had different plan. I wanted to do something on Bangladesh, but I decided to change the topic due to frustration. So I reached out to my professor, and my professor, Professor Maid, gave me permission. Many researchers, such as Gibbons, argues that Muslim women mathematicians contributed to mathematics during the golden age of Islam, especially in 10th century. The friendly environment for mathematics in the 10th century during the Abbasid Khilafat did not disallow women, Muslim women, to kind of pursue their study in mathematics and science. Even it did not disallow them to find a job in those fields in mathematics or science. So this is why many Muslim women really studied mathematics, and some of them like Fatima, like Sutait, like Amat, like Mariam, like what's her name? Lubna became very famous because they created new mathematics, new algebra, and some scientists use those mathematics to create machine like astrolabes to measure the altitude or latitude. So really 10th century, especially in the middle of the 10th century, really was a very friendly environment for a Muslim woman to study mathematics. But the next noted Muslim mathematician after Lubna of Cordova was Mariam Mirzakhani, was the next after Lubna of Cordova. So there is a gap between, and that gap is 1,000 years. From Lubna, the end of 10th century, to the 20th century, this is 1,000 years gap. And there is no Muslim women mathematician in these 1,000 years. Some scholars Justice Al-Husseini gave many reasons which I divided into three factors. Number one, untranslated document. Number two, the gender apartheid. Number three, the Western Islamophobia. But other researchers, such as Khalifi, give the different reasons, and who is I divided in 6 factors. And number one, the religious suppression. Number two, political fragmentation. Number three, cultural zeitgeist. Number four, no to printing machine, no to printing press. Number five, unmet Maslow's hierarchy and Mongol invasion. So now let me go one by one, explain all the factors as briefly as I possibly can. Now let's start with religious suppression. Now let's start with a quote from Prophet Muhammad. Prophet Muhammad said, I quote, "Every Muslim man and woman is required to seek knowledge." This really left a lot of room for people to interpret differently. For example, people like Khaja Nizamul Mulk really interpreted totally differently. He interpreted as if the Prophet Muhammad was talking about only Islamic knowledge. So what Khaja Nizamul Mulk did toward the end of 10th century, as I said during my introduction of the need for study, that the golden age of Islam did not last long, especially for Muslim women. Toward the end of 10th century, Khaja Nizamul Mulk started building lots of madrasas, and the existed madrasas, he changes the curriculum from the scientific and mathematics to the only religious study, left no room for women, especially aspiring women mathematicians, to pursue their career in math and science anymore. Furthermore, Khaja Nizamul Mulk appointed Imam Ghazali as a chief of the madrasas, the biggest madrasas in Baghdad. And Imam Ghazali's interpretation also represented the mindset of Nizamul Mulk, created an environment almost impossible for a Muslim woman to pursue nothing but religious studies. Now I'm going to talk about the political fragmentation. That's the second factor. The political fragmentation, when you talk about big, when you go big, you go strong. But that did not apply for the Islamic Empire. It went big, it grew big, because the Islamic Empire, don't make mistake, that the Abbasi Caliphate and the other Islamic Empire, they kept expanding, and their philosophy was invade and convert. So this philosophy, invade and convert, if someone don't convert, that tax them. So this philosophy worked in some extent, but did not work for some extent. For example, many newly turned Muslim state compete for same good. That's one. There was a clash of cultures. For example, newly Muslim state in India, and there was a clash between the Hindu culture and newly Muslim culture, Muslim Arabic culture. So there was a clash of culture. The same state started competing for the same resources, creating a zero-sum game within the Islamic Empire. So that also led to the end of, that also pushing for end of Islamic Golden Age. And who were noticing that? Mongols. Now that takes us to the another factors, and that is cultural zeitgeist. So the cultural zeitgeist really based on one factors, and that is the decline thesis, and that tells us that Muslim women, the aspiring Muslim women who wanted to study math and science, had no choice but to study religious or maybe nothing, because the patriarchal society, polygamy, women, for example, a very scholar women ended up become fifth wife of an illiterate man, or maybe 10th wife of an illiterate man. The polygamy society, the patriarchal society created a cultural zeitgeist that shifted the mathematical study to the religious study, to almost nothing, just giving birth to babies and raise them. Now we are going to move to the next one, and that is the Maslow's hierarchy. Now Maslow wrote a paper, and some researchers used that idea. For example, Khalil bin Jabed uses that idea and telling us that loss of Maslow's hierarchy, the needs of Maslow's hierarchy, especially the bottom one, was not met for Muslim women during end of 10th century to like 20th century. For example, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy, you will see that the food and access to good and the access to good health depend on income, and income comes from employment. If you do not have job, you do not have access to good food, you do not have access to education. Now look at 10th century, look at 11th century, 12th century, all the way to 20th century. The Muslim women did not have access to job. 99.99% according to the study conducted by Al-Husseini, that so many women did not have access to employment. That's why they did not have access to education. So Maslow's hierarchy, especially the bottom one, was not met for Muslim women. This is probably one of the reasons we did not, we don't have any Muslim women mathematician during this 1,000 years. Now let's go to the next one, the printing press. No to printing press. Now before I talk about no to printing press, I just want to talk about the Mongol invasion. Now when Mongol see the Hulagu Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, he kept close eyes to Baghdad. When he realized that political fragmentation, when he realized that the decline thesis, then he kind of decided to invade Baghdad, because he thought that that was the good time to invade Baghdad. That's what he did. So the first thing, he destroyed Baghdad two ways. The number one, he killed the Caliph. And number two, he destroyed the House of Wisdom. And he destroyed House of Wisdom two ways. Number one, he burned House of Wisdom. But he couldn't, he wasn't able to burn all the books. So he did what he did. He moved all the books, some of the books, remaining books, to the Tigris River. And he threw all those books to the Tigris River. Don't forget that Tigris River is the river where the history of mathematics was born. So the water of Tigris River turned to black, and due to the ink of the books. So many books were burned in Baghdad. So many books thrown to the river. Never that we lost those knowledge for good. Some were discovered by Tusi but remain untranslated, which we will talk about it in a few seconds. But the greatest loss for women losing the House of Wisdom is because the women, lots of Muslim women were worked in the House of Wisdom, and after the burning of House of Wisdom, women forever lost those type of math and science jobs. Now we're going to talk about no to printing press. Elizabeth Eisenstein said that Muslims no to printing press really is one of the biggest factors of the downfall of Islamic civilization, especially Islamic Golden Age. The printing press was invented by Gutenberg in Germany in 1450. But Muslim rulers, the sultans after sultans, decided to not use it. In fact, one of the sultans, Sultan Salim, passed a law, declared that if any Muslim uses the printing press to print anything in Arabic or Turkey, will be hanged to the death. So no to the printing press was one of the reasons we did not have any Muslim women mathematician during that 1,000 years. Now I'm gonna take a look about the research factor, 3 research factor I talk about. 3 research factor. Number 1, I said number 1 is untranslated document. The Tusi discovered some of the documents from Tigris River, and about 5 million, and lots of them remain untranslated. So if you really dig them, if you translate them, if you kind of do historiographical analysis on those translations, you're probably going to discover Muslim women mathematician during that gap. Another factor is the gender discrimination. The male scholars, lots of male mathematicians uses their wife to do the collaboration. But in their book, they never gave credit to their wife, because due to the culture, due to the patriarchal society, due to the polygamy culture, they never gave credit to their wife. So these need to be investigated. The other factor is the Western Islamophobia and the discrimination against women. Western Islamophobia is like some people in West believe that the Sharia law doesn't allow Muslim women to do math. Al-Hasimi's argument that many Western philosophers, scholars, researchers still think that the way Saudi Arabia used to not allow women to drive, the same way Muslim women in Arabia and other Muslim countries not allowed to, especially those time from 10th century to 20th century, not allowed to pursue their study in mathematics. So then if Islam doesn't allow them to study mathematics, that means they did not study mathematics. That means we do not have to do investigation. This misconception really caused the gap in literature. Another misconception is discrimination against women. For example, the head of one of the biggest research institute in the world said the men surpass women in scientific research because women are not smart enough to do math. But the biology said totally different thing. The biology says the women can process the quantitative analysis faster than the men. That's the recent biological study tell us. So this discrimination, this Western Islamophobia and discrimination against women, they both contributed to no research in the contribution of Muslim women to mathematics from 8th century to 20th century. I will do the historiographical analysis on this 9-factor 2 ways. Number one, I will do it on the existing literature. And number two, I will translate some of the selected documents and I will do historiographical analysis on those. By now you see one thing, that the history of mathematics suffers from the gap in research in Muslim women contribution to mathematics from 8th to 20th century. And not because of my frustration, due to I took a course with one of the professors and realized that no Muslim women, but to fulfill the gap. The purpose is really to fulfill the gap in the literature. The researcher will use historiographical analysis on those factors and using the research questions. So the first research question is what extent the theological interpretation of Quran and Hadith prohibited Muslim women to study math. Number two, what factors of political fragmentation really disallow women to pursue career in math and science? And the third research topic is what extent the cultural zeitgeist create a bad environment for women to grow as a mathematician. The fourth one is at what extent the Noto printing press really disallow women to become as a mathematician during 11th to 20th century. The next research question, this is question number 5, is what factors Mongol invasion created a bad situation for women to pursue a career in math and science. And then the next research topic number 6 is what factors of gender portrait really destroy Muslim women hope to become a mathematician. And the final one is what factors of Western Islamophobia really created the gap in the literature. Now I'm going to talk about the methodology. The methodology that I will use historiographical analysis on those factors to investigate these 9 research questions. Qualitative approach will be employed. I will use lots of secondary sources like the bank statement, the economic data from various economic institutions, and the researcher will also use 5 type of historians: Islamic scholars, economists, political scientists, socio-anthropological historians, and academians. The theory of mathematics suffers a gap in research in the contribution of Muslim mathematician from 8th to 20th century. This is due to, as I said, historic factors and research factors. There are 6 historic factors and 3 research factors. What I will do is that I will use historiographical analysis on those 9 factors to investigate the 8 research questions. The main goal is to fulfill the literature gap in the history of mathematics in Muslim women contribution to mathematics from 8th century to 20th century. Thank you for listening.